Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm Colynn Meridee.
And I'm Meridee.
And welcome to Spiritual Sisters with Sass, the podcast where two sisters with a passion for spirituality and a touch of sass come together to explore the exciting world of self-improvement.
That's right, Colynn. We embarked on this incredible journey together, diving into different self-improvement techniques, yoga practices, and a whole array of life experiences.
Yeah, and through it all, we've managed to create lives that are abundant, happy, and constantly evolving. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it, Meridee?
You bet, sis. We've got two very different perspectives on life, but that's what makes this podcast so special. I'm all about diving in head first into life's adventures and embracing every challenge with a bit of sass. While Colynn here, she's got her own unique approach.
Yep, that's me. And I'm all about the yoga, mindfulness, and finding my Zen. And together we make the perfect balance.
So whether you're looking for some wisdom, a few laughs, or just some heartfelt stories, you're in the right place. We're here to share our personal experiences and insights with you, all while exploring the wild and diverse world of self-improvement.
So grab your headphones and get ready for a fantastic journey with us. Spiritual Sisters with Sass is here to uplift, inspire, and keep it real.
Thanks for tuning in, lovely listeners. Let's dive in.
Spirit and sass. Here we go. All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on our podcast, Spiritual Sisters with Sass. I'm Colynn, and this is my sister Meridee. And today we are sharing about some of the agreements that I use as a base or a foundation for any type of group or training that we do together. So Meridee was just a part of a hybrid teacher training that we have concluded like last week. And we're looking at the agreements set in place so that people can feel safe, but also that we have like less drama. So coming from a place of experience of running and facilitating so many group programs, it's pretty hard to keep people happy. So I have these agreements that allows people like a safe space. And of course, when I introduce them, most people are like shocked. And then when we dive into it, it's like, oh, it can be really clear on like what there is to learn from that. So Meridee, you were just a part of like she was a little bit busy for the online portion of the hybrid training. So I sent her videos to complete on her own. And she was welcome into the space of the retreat in person where we really got to act out those agreements on the daily. So Mer, what was your experience of like being on retreat? Also with your sister facilitating.
So it was kind of awesome. It was like when I started this whole yoga teacher training journey, it wasn't for certification. It was more, I want to get to know more about myself. And what better way than to do that, especially because of the way that yoga works. And just for those who don't know, yoga is not just the asanas, which is the postures, which is the physical practice. That's one aspect, one limb of the 8 limbs of yoga. And within that, we learned, especially in the hands-on one and the face-to-face, was we learned about the kleshas, which are the reasons that you're suffering. And then we dig into the 8 limbs of yoga, which is the way out of suffering. And in that, just in that alone, there was so much I learned about myself. But being in the hands-on part of it or the face-to-face part of it, I really got like we dug in pretty freaking deep. And we talked a lot about, like emotional things and how all of these, things come together and how yoga really is the answer. And all the while, I'm also reading this book called Abundance by Deepak Chopra. And it's about abundance, of course, but it's about money abundance, abundance in your life. And he talks entirely about yoga with a capital Y. Oh, here we go again. Yoga with a capital Y, which is the 8 limbs of yoga, and yoga, which is the physical asanas. And so in that, I actually got called out during our teacher training, and she was like, let's go back to look at these agreements. And we did discuss the agreements when we first started on the online stuff. And then to be in there, one of the agreements is don't coach other people. And I'm making a face right now because it's really hard for me not to coach other people. That being said, I've gotten way better at asking for permission before I just step on toes. Also, in that coaching of these other people, there was a lot of asking me to coach them, asking for my opinion, and then still being called out because that's not part of what the retreat is about. But I think the thing that probably was the hardest one for me wasn't even so much the not coaching other people, but not consoling other people, which is the one we're going to talk about the most today. So I feel like you should lay out the agreements first, and then let's get into the agreements briefly, and then really dig into the other ones that are the ones that like hit hard.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is years of drama. If I can put it any other way, of drama in teacher trainings, this is a way to create a space container, or a safe container, for people to be open and share and feel safe. Also knowing that safety is defined by the person that is experiencing the space or the container. So knowing that that's a huge thing. This is, I mean, we've talked so much about the agreements, and it's not just coming from a place like you need to make agreements with your partner. It's like on the regular. I think that we need to make agreements, because even as I'm here visiting family, you know, I am experiencing that space of not being what someone wants me to be.
Ooh, can you explain that?
Yeah. So, you know, I think quite personally, between my oldest daughter and I, is an expectation of who and what I am as a mom. And then we have me that lives off in another country, kind of facilitating and holding space for all these other people doing all these other things, where I maybe am not held accountable or even just like asked for a thing. So if somebody has, let's just say my daughter, for example, has an example of how I should be as a mother, and then she's upset at me for not being that mother. The unfortunate part is that we haven't had like a conversation or made agreements of what she needs from me as her mother. And so then
And
when
whether you're willing to do those things, I think, as well, because in certain cases, Brooke may ask me to do something that she would like me to be as a mother, and it's, one, in my opinion, not conducive to her growth, or it's me over giving or not holding my own boundaries. So there's pieces of this too where we need to own our shit and be like, okay, this I'll do for you, and these I can't do for you.
right, because there's also a piece to being authentic. So
Yes.
even in our conversations, when I'm saying, how do you need me to show up for you? She also can say, well, I don't want you to change who you are, which is on me. I'm like, I got me. What do you need from me right now? And I think that that also can be quite confronting, because I think sometimes we don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't want that.
Yeah.
And this is a key piece of coaching, in which I'm like, great, this is such a solid foundation. When you know what you don't want, what you want is usually the opposite.
Opposite.
So
Yeah.
it's a great place to start, but it is a way that we can continuously just like bypass instead of asking for what we want.
Yes.
You know, my partner even makes me ask him to tickle my feet, because I'll put my feet on his lap and like put my foot into his hand. He's
But not actually ask for
but
what
not
you're
ask him.
wanting.
Yeah,
Fair.
and he won't do it, which is,
Uncomfortable for you.
it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable for me to say, can you please tickle my feet? And then I think most of the discomfort comes from like the fact that he could say no. because
Mhm.
the rejection is what I feel is a huge, I don't, I say but I think it's in general, but I'm going to speak for me. It's a constant thing that I'm worried about. So then even I like this idea of like even asking for sex, right? I'll get mad at
Yeah.
my partner for not initiating it. Excuse me? Like
My
if you want
expectation is
it,
that you're going to start it
yeah,
because I
yeah,
want it, even though we've
yeah,
had zero communication
yeah.
about what that looks like.
Yes, yes. So, little sidetrack kind of examples as to how this applies to our lives, but also how these agreements came in so clearly for me on how to set a space so that there is less drama. Trust me, it doesn't stop it all.
No.
And even though I can be this fucking yoga teacher that shows up and gives everybody advice, doesn't mean that sometimes even when the agreements are there and I'm leaning on them heavily, that I show up perfectly. So I've got the agreements here, and I used to have them as like like no coaching each other. And so one time someone mentioned that's a lot of negatives. And I thought, okay, great. So I reworded them all and flipped them into the positive.
Okay.
So the first one is confidentiality. Like,
Yeah.
that one feels pretty clear. What
Yeah.
goes on in yoga teacher training stays in yoga teacher training, right? I also think it's important in our lives to have a conversation around like what gets shared. I
Yeah.
do know that some people I think are a little bit controlling in what gets shared with others. When you're in a relationship, I think if the only person that your partner has to talk to about problems with you, that's very unhealthy.
Yeah. I
I
agree.
think they should have free reign to share what they want with who they want. And if that's a problem for you, create an agreement. And if they can't shut their mouth and they tell everybody, that's actually very manipulative. It's onboarding people onto shit, and then those people have a bad opinion of you, and that doesn't really go away when you love someone. So if you get hit by someone, Meridee, and then you tell me, I now have a disdain for that person.
Yeah.
Right? And then anytime anything bad would happen, I'd be like, why the fuck are you with him or her? Right? And so then, and if you just share that with everyone, what are you doing then? Like, leave your
Yeah.
partner. We all
Yeah.
know that someone hitting you is not okay. So what's the story here? So confidentiality is the first one, and then the second one is take your own advice. So that's no coaching. So I'm going to read from, I have a write up on it too, just in case someone doesn't understand what I'm saying. We can go back and see that it's clearly written out for you. And I make sure everybody puts their hand up and acknowledges the agreement. And if they don't agree, that it's open to conversation or discussion. This isn't just like these are the rules, these are agreements we're making.
Yeah.
So the take your own advice is no coaching each other. Unsolicited advice is one of the biggest mistakes that a majority of people make. How do you like it? A majority of people actually just want to be heard, not given advice. People already know inherently what it is they want to do. And as a person giving advice, it is usually advice that is specific to the person giving it. Want to know what to do with your advice? Be quiet and take it. Also, coaching others pulls you out of your process. You're here for you, be here for you.
And this one was the one Meredith got. And so in it though, I feel like it was such a great place for me to look because it was very similar to your own experience on our podcast, where we come from a place of I hear myself say it to you, and I'm hearing that I'm actually talking to myself, but when are you taking the time to integrate that into your own life? And so she called me out on it and was like, so where are you integrating it? And I was like, and I just kind of sat there because in the moment I'm giving it, and she was like, but how? Because then you're not creating safe space for anyone else. And I was like, ooh. And then to sit and think about like, when am I actually sitting with this by myself at home in a quiet time to really take the information in? Oh yeah, I'm not. Do you meditate on it? Not on that specifically. So like literally it was like an eye opener for me, because this goes back to when Lynn and I were talking on the podcast, and I was like, hey, like every time I ask you to dig further in, you spin it back around on me, which is your coaching. And I'm sure all of you guys have seen, she went from like very coachy and very like spinning it back onto me to vulnerable and open to being coached and open to conversations around what's going on within herself. And so it was a really great place for me to look and say, I see what you've done and I see what you're talking about. And then I stopped coaching. Even when asked, I was like, I don't really have any feedback right now for you, because I became very focused on my own journey through this. And in this journey, people keep asking me like, so what was your week away like? It looked really interesting, blah, blah, blah. And you know, the people of oh, it was so hard to get in that water. Hey. And I was like, I mean, it was, but it wasn't. It's really interesting how every single one of us woke up and was like immediately thinking about excuses we could use to get out of it. Like even the facilitator, Lynn, saying, this morning I was going to be like, I just can't, I slept in. So sorry. I hope you guys go do it without me. And how I would wake up and be like, oh, I could have a headache today. Like, wow. At the same time as get your ass down to that cold water and get in it, because it's the hardest thing you're going to do today, and you're going to feel fucking fantastic when you're done with it. So we did, and we all did it, but it was super interesting because on our way down to the cold water, we would have that conversation about all the excuses that we could have to avoid what we were about to do. So yeah, okay, on to the next one.
Well, I would say if we look at this, because I do believe there's a bypass in the two agreements that was happening for you, and I don't want to move quite forward to it yet, is this idea of like, do you know what you need to do? I mean, I hear that so much. Do you know what you need to do? Let's just take the word need. That means if I don't do it, that I'm wrong.
I was just reading this, actually. Deepak talks about it in the abundance thing. And he said there's a very big difference between what you need and what you want. And just because you want something doesn't mean the universe is going to provide it, because it's not what you need in your life.
Right.
So again, coming down to like that acknowledgement of what I actually need versus what I want. And 90% of the time, what I want is not what I need. And what I
Right.
need doesn't always feel good when I get it.
Right. And so, I mean, there are options, like, you know what you could do here, or what I would do, but that's coming from a completely different place of like owning the responsibility of the advice that's being given. And so, first and foremost, I often find giving advice to be a waste of time, because I find that most people don't listen to it anyways. They will take up my time and ask me all these questions, but then like not do anything with the information. So why do we even like have that conversation? And then the other piece is based on your lens. That's where you're giving advice from.
Yeah.
So all the experiences that have ever happened to you in your life is how you're giving advice. So if someone's in a relationship and their partner's cheating on them, you know, based on your relationships and your version of cheating and what's happened with you in your life with cheating, that's the advice you're going to give somebody else. So, you know, the advice that both Meridee and I would give to someone could be very different, right? I have cheated. I have known that that comes from a place of, first and foremost, people pleasing. Secondly, like, and that's not being honest. The people pleasing, not being honest. And then from a place of also trying to be honest, but not being heard, which is also on me. Like, I'm taking full responsibility for the situation. And it happened because I was incredibly unhappy for many years. And I just needed somebody to fucking want me as like a woman, not a useless skin around the vagina, or the chick that cooks and cleans and takes care of the kids and then is a plug-in at night and in the morning every fucking day for 10 years. Like,
I see. And for me as well in this, because I was the one being cheated on, not the cheater, because I didn't actually cheat on my partners. I, being the person being cheated on, those things felt like then you should have left me, or see, so this is where our perspectives are different, is because she was one of those people that was contributing or cheating, and I was the person on the receiving end of being hurt by the person cheating on me because I wasn't giving them what they needed. And what I just heard you say was that you needed this validation, and now doing the work, we realize that the only person that's going to give that validation is yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to start to become a conscious person to be able to start working on these things, because
you don't have to, you can be.
I feel like the only way, for my opinion on this, is that the only way for me to work on those things is for me to become more conscious of my own behaviors. So in that, I wouldn't have been like, let's talk about that. This was what, 15 years ago that was the case for you. And 15 years ago, we were not necessarily doing this work. So you were unconsciously doing these things, not realizing that what you were looking for, and that what you were looking for could only be fulfilled by yourself. So you kept looking at it in other places.
Those things led to where we are now.
Yes.
And there's so many levels of consciousness, right? It's not like someone's just awake. There's so many levels of awakening. I was once shown a really cool diagram, which comes back to the flower of life, that I would love to share. I mean, I can just fucking do it right now, to be honest. I'm just gonna
Diagrams are hard for the people not on YouTube. But
oh yeah, you're right. I won't do it. Never mind. You're right.
yeah.
That's
but
okay.
I find that, yeah, that there's like these different levels of consciousness, these different levels of awareness, is another way to put it, is our growing. That's how we grow. That's the stepping stones that we take. And I needed to experience everything I've experienced in my life to become the person that I am today.
Yeah. And I mean, there's different levels of cheating, you know. At some point, were you ever talking to another person while you were married that you were interested
Not
in?
that I was married, but while I was dating, while I was in a committed relationship.
You were married.
And he felt.
You were married.
Oh, were you? Oh, you're talking about my psycho. Yes.
But we don't have to get into it. I'm just saying there's different levels of all these different things that we can bypass and push off without looking at it like, oh, well, that's also considered cheating. And some people are like, emotional is worse than physical, and blah, blah, blah. So there's like, right. And then you can defend that. And then, so it's like, yes. And it's pretty easy to be like, what a piece of shit, just leave them.
Yeah.
Right. And that comes from a place of like, okay, but in the same situation, are you going to do that? Because even when you're coming from your own lens, often we don't take our own advice. So we're giving ourselves advice constantly, because that's who you're coaching to when you coach other people. Mm-hmm. And the bypass in that is that you don't have to take it because you're telling other people to. And if they don't take it, well, then they're idiots.
Yeah, right?
Right? Instead of sitting in it and being like, oh, here's all the other ways that I can own my experiences of cheating in my life and then heal and grow from that. Instead, I'll just bypass it on to everybody, and then they can be idiots. So I love that. So then that also goes to agreement number 3, which is hold space for others. And the old agreement was no consoling. So I'm just going to read the write-up that I have here, okay? When looking at the energetics of handing somebody a tissue or placing a hand on someone to comfort them, it really is an energetic motion to stop. Even though people are not quite aware of it, the idea is to dry one's tears or to stop one from crying. The idea is usually that we are uncomfortable with other people expressing their emotion. So our consoling often unconsciously comes from a place of our own discomfort. What would it look like to allow someone the space to express without you trying to fix it or make them feel better? They don't need to feel better. There is nothing wrong with feeling in general. Also, are you asking for consent before touching, and do you not trust that the person can ask for a Kleenex for themselves?
So this one is the one that I really want to talk about today, because this one came to me. We had this one in the retreat that you and I did the first time, and it was so uncomfortable. And for me, it's not the discomfort necessary. I want to say it's not, but I guess it is. The discomfort of seeing someone else in pain and wanting to help them with their pain. But what I've come to realize is that when I'm trying to help you with your pain, I'm pulling you out of the feeling of feeling your pain. And the whole purpose of feeling is to feel. So we're supposed to sit in that feeling and feel it. And if someone tells me it's okay, you've got this, suddenly I'm going to shut off the feeling and feeling because it's okay. I've got this. Where I'm the one time I might actually take your advice.
Yeah.
But like, and then I'm sitting there with my niece who there's like in this hybrid teacher training, there's my sister, myself, and my niece. There are other people there, but like this created a different kind of dynamic that we had to work with as well. And my niece is like really going through it right now. She is growing drastically. She is learning about herself. She's taking personal responsibility, which she's never done before. And she's sitting beside me and she's feeling all these feelings. And for me to just sit there and watch her feel these feelings and do nothing to help her, like she's one of my 4 children. So as a parent, what I'm supposed to do is help you feel better, really, is what it comes down to. Not even help you heal, because helping someone heal means letting them fucking feel. And instead, all I want to do is hold her and love her and give her all my love, because my love's going to fix it. But guess what? My love isn't fixing anything. Her love is the only thing that's going to fix this for her. And so within that, sitting in my own shit and letting myself be uncomfortable with her feeling her pain. And that was really hard because, again, like I said, it's like sitting by your child and just watching them cry and being like, that's what it feels like. Even if you've got all this compassion and you're sending all this love, it feels like you're just sitting there being like, because you're not allowed to do anything.
Right.
So it was really, for me, when people have been asking what was your trip like, the response that I have is healing, because we did the podcast with Brooke and I feel like that opened some things. I feel like it opened some things with her that she's not ready to talk about, because we haven't talked a lot since I got back and I leave again soon. So it was really strange that was the case, but I think it's opened some things for her. I've noticed with your daughter and with my own, and I don't know where else this is, but I know it shows up even with, like, I noticed it with yours first within the healing of these conversations. That like we would dig into like the trauma, and you and I both know that we have inflicted trauma on our children because we're parents. And then when we ask them about it, they immediately want to protect us and start telling us about how their dads did things and that they can see what their dads have done, but they won't talk about what they've done with us because they're scared to hurt us. So it's the same as no consoling, but they're avoiding talking directly to us about the pain that we've inflicted because they want to console us by not hurting us in so many ways. And so I saw that with your daughter and the conversations we were having. And it's great because they're acknowledging the dad side of it. Awesome. But I also want us to heal, and I want you to feel free enough to be able to say to me, here's the things that are really hurting me. So within that, I saw that. And I was like, oh, this is that consoling thing, because they're doing it without even being conscious that they're doing it. Like, I want to have these conversations so we can talk about what I've done to you. I saw from my side what your dad did to you, but I want to see what I've done to you and what your perspective of that is. With your daughter, we ended up staying up way too late because we were up at 5:30 every morning, but her and I stayed up very, very late having like a 3-hour conversation about our relationship. And I have to tell you, it was probably one of the hardest relationships or hardest conversations that I've had, because of the fact that I had to own my shit. I had to hear her perspective of what I had done. And I had to hear her perspective of me being the adult and her being the child. And what I mean by that is she said something to me about, like, her and I had it out. We used to say it's because we're so alike. I mean, even still to this day, we are so alike. And there's so many things that, like, it is why we did it, but also doesn't make it okay. And she had kind of said to me, like, we talked, she said, what blowouts do you remember? Because her and I had some big blowouts. I'm going to say there was probably 4 or 5 really big blowouts with her and I. And the one biggest one that her and I both remember was our California trip. And she said to me, "You smacked me across the face." And I was like taken back. And I was like, "No, I didn't." And she's like, "I know our memories are not reliable." She's like, "But I remember you smacking me across the face." And I was like, "I don't, but I apologize if I did. I could have very well blocked that out because it felt so wrong. I never even smacked her. I never even treated my children the way I treated you," is what I said to her. And we talked about where that perspective, my perspective in that came from, was that she was so disrespectful. And I was always trying to put her in her place. And many times you said to me, like, "Who are you to be her karma?" And I remember at one point I was like, "She's fucking right. Like, I need to back up and let this kid learn herself." And so her and I had this conversation, and she brought up like these things that we experienced together. So I never put my hands on my own kids. Like, once grabbed them physically by their sweaters, as one Brooke like shoulder checked me. She walked by me like this, and I grabbed her sweater and like pinned her over a counter and was like in her face. But I didn't hit my kids or beat my kids. My kids got spanked with a wooden spoon when they turned around and laughed at me. Brooke didn't get spanked with a wooden spoon because my hand was all it required. Caden turned around and laughed at me when he was 5 and was like, "That doesn't hurt." So I ended up spanking him with a wooden spoon. That was the worst my kids got. I put my hand on your daughter and grabbed her by the arm and dragged her into a room and like shoved her in the room and let her go. And then she said, "Well, I want water." And so I grabbed water and I chucked the water bottle at her and was like, "Here's your fucking water." I had never treated my own children in that way. And when we were talking, I said, like, my apologies for everything that I did, because in back then I felt justified in it, and it's not justified. It gave me a chance to really come from the adult perspective and see my own relationship with my mother, even though I'm not her mother. It gave me that chance to have that perspective of like, right now is my chance to own my shit and apologize for what I've done wrong, and allow this child, even though she's not a child, our relationship as adult child, it allows me to heal this relationship with her, validate everything that she's saying, apologize for what I've done to her, and let us heal moving forward. And I saw how hard it was for me to own that shit. And then understood, okay, so my mother can't own that stuff, and that's okay. But I'm choosing to consciously heal the relationship that I have with my niece because it's so important to me. And to hear her say things like, I knew I could shit on you because you'd always love me, but then when you would shit back on me, I felt like you didn't love me. And we're having this conversation, and all of a sudden I realized that she says to me, "I just didn't think we were okay." And I was like, "You mean like in the last like 5 years?" And she's like, "Yeah, I didn't know if we'd ever come back." And I was like, "Dude, this hurts me because I didn't hold on to any of these things. Like, no matter what, I knew you would come around. I knew our relationship would heal from this, and I knew we'd be okay." And she was like, "I didn't." So having that conversation, because in my mind, we were already okay. We didn't even need to have this conversation, but we did in order for her to heal. So it was like a really wide eye-opening experience for me to have this conversation with her, because with this conversation, she wasn't scared. She was scared, and she even said that. She's like, "This is a really hard conversation to have with you." But she wasn't scared to be honest with me about how I had impacted her, which is where Brooke doesn't do it with me and she doesn't do it with you. So it was a really great place to see how hard it was, and then how hard it was for myself to own those things. Because wow, now we both now have this, like, we hugged the shit out of each other. And I think it's completely changed our relationship. I feel like it's brought like this heavy boundary that she kind of had as a wall between us. I think it's gone now. I feel like we'll be significantly closer because of this. Now, within that, I also talked to your oldest daughter and sent her a message saying, like, "I just want you to know how much I love you and appreciate you and all of the things." And her experience of me is so very different than your younger daughter's experience of me. Because your older daughter's experience, she even replied with, "Every time we came to visit you, it was always one of the most exciting times of my life, blah, 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 blah." And she said, "I appreciate you so much," which I don't think that your youngest would have been able to say that to me. I want to say now she openly says it. She even said to me while we were talking about it, she said that probably one of the funnest weeks of my life was the week I spent at your place with brook and almost killed myself eating a nectarine or pit. So there was just so many different perspectives and different places for me to heal myself, heal relationships with others, and really look at myself in all of this. And it felt really good to do, but it was super hard to do.
So if we go back to how you use coaching as a way of consoling, and really how coaching is a way that you can bypass your own healing, right? If you're just there coaching everybody, you don't have to really actually go deep into it because you're just telling everybody else what to do. And sure, yeah, you listen to it, but you really don't, because you're so busy telling everybody else what to do. And when we were talking about, because a lot of the agreements and the way that I run trainings and also my life, the best of my ability is from the teachings of Don Miguel Ruiz with the 4 agreements. Being impeccable with our words, and just and not taking things personal, doing our best. Where we were looking at how being impeccable with your word can include not swearing so much. And we started talking about how swearing can be used so unconsciously as a space filler, and that there's a lot of negativity or attachment to those words that those words carry that land on people differently, and therefore we cannot hold safe space if we're constantly swearing just in general, because not everybody likes swearing. So that's not neutral language. That's actually very charged language, and as I mentioned, people don't feel safe in that space. So we were talking about that, and one of the days, the last day when we were going down to the lake to jump in, Sari said, "Last day, bitches." And I was saying how that was like an unconscious use of the word and how that could be, exclusive. And Sari's reaction, which is often a very big ego reaction, not Sari's reaction, just like in reaction to things that people say that we don't always agree with. It's like, well, I don't want people like that around me then. And I mean, I hear that, and it's a bypass. I said, can you see how you're bypassing and actually just avoiding, maybe changing your language?
And we didn't.
And
until the
yeah,
person that was
see, do you
there.
hear her? We didn't. So Meridee immediately jumps in there and starts defending Saren. So she's consoling her and coaching at the same time. Like she's jumping, but Saren is saying this, that, and we're like, yeah, no, we get it. You're coaching, stop it. She's trying to ease the discomfort for Sari. And by doing that, then Sari has like someone on her side and then won't look at it from a different perspective. And so sitting right beside her was another participant in the teacher training that said, I'm one of those people. And you love me, don't you? And do you want me in your life? Well, you're just saying that you don't by dismissing it so abruptly, like, well, I don't want people like that in my life. And we're also saying, Meridee, stop. Because she's jumping in, trying to get like Sari's point across for us to hear. So she's literally consoling her through coaching as well. And so I was like, let's just look at this whole thing that's going on here. Because it is really about like, yeah, Meridee wanting to save Sari from her own discomfort. And that's the piece, is like what I've learned through the Yamas and the Niyamas by Deborah Adele, a really incredible book that talks about the first 2 limbs of yoga called the Yamas and the Niyamas, things to do and not to do, to have a meaningful and purposeful life and stop struggling and suffering. In it talks about like we have to trust people to be able to take care of themselves. Like literally everyone right now, there's 8-9 billion people in the world, and they're all living out their lives. And what are people doing? They're judging everybody else for the way that everybody's living their lives. Like, you know better, like you do any better. Like, and if you think you do, I can show you 27 places where you're not doing better. And maybe even the person you're judging that's homeless on the road taking a crack hit, like they probably do something better than you do, like even if it is smoking crack, right? Like there's this judgment is such a way to continue to suffer, because really it's only ever a projection of the judgment of self. And so we run around wanting people to not be who they are. And then we get pissed at them for being who they are and think we have any influence on how anybody lives their life. And when they don't listen, they're a narcissist and they can get out, period. And that is not a way to grow. That's so unconscious. It's so unconscious. I encourage, and I'm just getting like heated here, for people to stop calling other people narcissists. Stop it. It's
We
not
all have
cool.
narcissistic traits.
We
All of us.
all are narcissistic. It's inherently the ego. The ego is a narcissist. And
Yeah.
that's why, you're alive right now. So stop it. Just because somebody doesn't agree with you. And sure, there are people out there that have narcissistic personality disorder. That's a disorder. That's a mental illness. That's a personality issue. So, like, have some compassion. It's not an excuse that somebody's bipolar and so therefore they are terrible. Like, or you can't have a relationship with them, or that's the excuse that they're such an asshole. Like, holy, I'm like really in it and
I mean,
feeling.
also it can be the reason that they're such an asshole.
Sure. But so, you know what? I don't know anybody that's not an asshole. That's the thing. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I've
It's
seen
called
you be
our
an
shadow side.
asshole.
It's
I'm an
we're
asshole.
yep.
My kids can be assholes. My partner can be an asshole. Like, I just think that it's like this projection. If we stop like looking out and started looking in, another limb of yoga. Oh my God.
Yeah. It was definitely very eye-opening, because in that moment of Siri saying like last day bitches, I was like,
Yep.
I totally understood where she was coming from and why she said it, because like that's like, I call my best friend a bitch all the time in a loving way. And if she had been called a psycho bitch her entire life or any of those things, it would impact her in a different way. And a lot of us don't have the balls to say, hey, so that word really hurts me. And that word is really hard for me to hear you call me. Because much like Siri, we blow it off or try and turn it into the positive, when at the same time that word can trigger both things in us.
I just want to say
So it was
balls are
really,
super tender and can't withstand anything. So I
it's
don't want
definitely been
balls
an interesting,
to do anything. It's ovaries that are really tough.
yeah, a vagina gets beaten and just keeps on going. So we could talk about that.
You said if we just had the balls to, that's where I was like,
I mean, we just
I
don't
know,
talk about the things.
I know.
And that's the part that I feel like we all need to work on the most, is these hard conversations.
Yeah.
And being willing to have a hard conversation, knowing, and this is the thing that we talked about with you, the first limb of yoga is ahimsa, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that the first one?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it's ahimsa,
Non-violence.
and that is nonviolent. And the second one is honesty, and this is where Lynn
Well,
would be spiritually
truthfulness.
truthfulness.
Yeah.
And yeah, because honesty can be my own truth. Now,
Honesty
that
is
being
different.
said,
Yeah.
in that, part of the conversations that we've had is Lynn would not say her truth because she didn't want to be violent, because her truth would hurt someone else. So she would spiritually bypass her own truth to try to live up to limb one, but limb one and limb two need to go hand in hand. And the side effect of someone being hurt by my words is their own experience. My words are my own words. These are my hard conversations. This is how I feel, and how you feel is yours. So having that hard conversation that people are so uncomfortable with, because it may hurt, doesn't mean you should be doing, like, it doesn't mean that your truth is violent. Your truth may just not feel good for someone else.
And that's the huge piece of not consoling, is like really recognizing that in order to heal, we have to feel. And that it's really important that people are trusted to just take care of their own lives. Because that's a lot of work to run around trying to control everybody's outcome. Like, good luck with that. And just let me know how
and
that's going for you.
yeah, like if we aren't living the perfect life that you're telling someone else to live, how are you telling someone else to live that life? So that's where that integrity and what do you call it? Something with your words.
Being impeccable.
So that is being impeccable with your word to me, because impeccable with your word means integrity. It means living what you're speaking to somebody else. Are you, like, for a perfect example is with me, I own an addictions company. I'm helping people with addictions. So if I'm in active addiction, then I'm doing the opposite of what I'm telling people to do. And I see that in life everywhere right now, where all these coaches are telling you what to do. But if you were a fly on the wall in their life, you would be like, look here, you're telling me how to do all these things and you ain't practicing any of them in your own life. And that for me is where we've talked about it a few times, where I've said I feel like I'm more in alignment and more integral in my life right now than I have ever been. I teach from a place of doing, and I'm trying to always be, if I've said it, that's exactly how I'm acting. And if not, then I acknowledge that as well and say, this is something I'm doing. This is something I'm working on to be better at. Not trying, doing. I am working on being better at this. This is something I'm struggling with in my life. Like conversations that I have with my best friend is, I understand where you're coming from with boundaries and the struggle with it, because I'm also struggling with that in my own life. Right? So this is where I feel like I've never been so in alignment with my life and with what I'm putting out, as well as the life that I'm living, and how equal they are. You're smiling. What is that
I
look
am,
about?
because in my head, it's like also by being so in alignment and integral, it's calling in more places where you're not in alignment and you're out of
1000%.
integrity. It's amazing the layers and the depth that we can go into when you're able, because if you're pointing your finger at anybody, I just want you to notice that there's three fingers pointing back, like always. So shut up. Stop. Like, stop telling someone else or judging someone else. No wonder your life is shit.
Now, can we talk about the definition of judgment, because this is also a really great one that I found. And then I also want to talk very quickly about the doubt thing. So, definition of judgment
So
is express.
non-judgmental is when you don't express your opinion.
So, judging is expressing your opinion, meaning that thought can go through your head, but when you say it out loud, you're now judging.
Yes.
So, I feel like if it's in my head and I've said it to myself, I'm still judging, but it gives me a place to look at myself.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about the doubt part, where having this conversation or telling you how to do something means that I don't believe in you enough to take care of your own
Right.
life.
Yes.
It also comes down to, in the book that I've just given to Lynn, and I actually just had my best friend buy as well. It's called Worthy. I've talked about it a few times. In there, she talks about whatever you want to call God, universe, spirit, the space that fills between, Jesus, whatever it is to you. When you doubt yourself or others in their lives and what they're creating, in your own life and what you're creating, and you start doubting that you can do the things that you have said you want to do, or any of these things, you're actually doubting your God. You're doubting that you were created perfectly, and that out of the 1 in 9 billion chance that you got to be here, you're not enough exactly as you are.
Yeah.
And that part for me, doubting the universe. So the universe knows everything. It knows all, it experiences all of the things, but I'm going to know better, and I'm 1 in a billion.
yeah.
That just does not feel right.
And
That
you're
does
only
not
using
feel,
7% of your brain. How smart are
yes,
you?
like, but I know better. My doubt knows better than you.
Yeah.
And yet, one of my favorite sayings in the whole wide world is, fear kills more dreams than failure ever will.
Yeah.
Because failure, you get to get up and try again. Fear means you didn't even fucking try. And that one for me, right there, I at least want to try.
again, we doubt from our perspective, like your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. So if you're just running around throwing your judgment and your doubt on everybody else, it's because you don't trust yourself. Go back to the podcast that's labeled personal responsibility. Everything is an opportunity for you to grow. And the more that you put your judgments out, the more that you worry, the more that you project all of your stuff onto everybody else, the more you're going to suffer. And that's it. Like we've talked about the clutches. I feel done with this conversation. I'm like ready for mic drop. Let's end this. But I'll introduce really quickly the clutches, which we can also just like have a whole podcast on. The clutches are the reasons that we suffer. And the very first one is because you are ignorant. And what are you ignorant about? You're ignorant about who you really are. Right.
Which
And
is
the
God.
idea is within yoga is that you are part of the universe, you are God. And so if you misidentify as your ego, which is the second klesha, then you're going to suffer. And when you identify with the ego, then you attach to material things and feeling good, and you're averse to feeling bad and losing stuff. And therefore you have fear. And so there's your 5 reasons for suffering. You forget who you are. So you misidentify as your ego, like this personality that's called your name.
And
therefore
quickly in that one, with the ego, my coach and I had a conversation about this, because in my mind, there was like this, my ego is like my inner child. What is this phase?
I'm like, I want to be done. Just quickly, let's talk more about this one.
Sorry, but this just feels like something we need to talk about, is that my coach brought this ego thing up and said to me, like, I thought it was my inner child, and I felt like it was like this nasty, the bad side of me. And what he said to me was, what if your ego is just the thing that attaches to labels? And that made it so I could have some more compassion with my ego as well.
I mean, you hate your ego, then you're just going to keep struggling. It's just like, stop identifying as it, because when you do, then you attach to labels. You are averse to labels, and then you're fearful of labels. Like there's and I feel I was at you for a minute because I'm like, I am done. So I'm just owning that in that moment where I'm like, fuck, I don't want to talk about this anymore. So clearly I'm feeling exhausted. This has been a lot. It's been a lot. I came here to run a fucking marathon. And then I ran between family members and a lot of drama within the family members of their own struggles, and then held space for a teacher training, and then came here with my oldest daughter in the last little bit of like also just like holding space, and found out that I'm going to be a grandma, which is awesome. And so it's been a lot, right? We told her dad the other
Okay, so he
day,
knows
and that
now.
was a lot, right? It's not like, oh yeah, you're pregnant. It's like you've made a huge mistake. So
Yeah.
thank you for also just like understanding my humanness, and thank you everyone for being here. Are we cool to end?
Yeah.
I'm
Bye,
clearly
everybody.
done.
Thank you, guys.
And I'm asking for what I want. So thank you
Yeah.
everyone for listening, and Meridee, and yeah, we'll
Okay.
see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this spirited journey today.
We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of self-improvement with us. 2 sisters who found their own unique paths.
Remember, life is a tapestry of experiences, and it's how we embrace them that makes all the difference.
So whether you're on your yoga mat, exploring mindfulness, or simply navigating life's twists and turns, always keep that spirit and sass alive.
We are Colynn and Meridee Locked Up, and we're here to remind you that happiness and abundance are within reach.
Stay connected with us on social media and keep those questions and stories coming. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, beautiful souls, keep doing the work, keep sharing your experiences, and keep living a life that's authentically you.
And never forget to add a little extra sass to your day.
Spirit and sass, always.